Earlier this month, the History Center in Tompkins County opened their exhibit, Historic Coverlets Unwrapped. The goal of the exhibit, in the words of the History Center, is to explore and document the coverlet collection, understand the historical significance of coverlets then and now, and to create awareness of the collection within the community and beyond. And here to talk about the exhibit and how the History Center is working to achieve these goals is Nancy Ostman, a member of the Tompkins County Quilters Guild and a consultant on the exhibit. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us this evening on WRFI Community Radio News.
I'm pleased to be here.
So to start off, I was wondering if you could just explain to our listeners what is a coverlet?
Okay, a coverlet is a woven bed covering. They were made in mostly in New York, Pennsylvania, also Ohio, and Illinois, mostly between 1820 and 1850. They're a heavy bed covering, one layer of cotton, one layer of wool woven together to make a double, very warm coverlet.
So what's the kind of history of this kind of textile in the United States? Is it native to the States?
Most of the coverlet makers actually came from Europe. They came from Scotland, Ireland, Germany. The Industrial Revolution was taking place in Europe at that time, and they were being pushed out of their jobs as private coverlet makers. And they came to this country. The Industrial Revolution was just beginning on the east coast of this country. They moved inland a little bit to places like Ithaca and set up what they called little factories. And what was really moving this ability for them to set up these factories was the development of the jacquard attachment on a loom. It was like a computer-generated pattern for the coverlets, and every thread could be picked up individually on the coverlet, so they could make fancy designs. Previously, people had made coverlets, but they were geometric designs, sort of looking like plaids, and they could be woven by women on home looms. But the later coverlets after 1820 were mostly made by men who were professionals, and they were using this expensive jacquard attachment that let them do what they called fancy coverlets.
So you would say that coverlets then kind of represent they're kind of the manifestation of this big leap forward of this kind of loom technology then.
Yes, indeed.
What role did Ithaca and maybe the Tompkins County area play in the coverlet story? Were there just a particular number of makers in the area?
There were. Archibald Davidson was from Ithaca, and he had the Ithaca Carpet and Coverlet Factory, and he was well known. The coverlets are an interesting historical artifact because many of the coverlet makers put their name on them. They put the name of their client on them and the date and sometimes the place where they were made. So you can find an Archibald Davidson coverlet that was made for Phoebe Davenport or something in 1832 in Ithaca. And as a historic artifact, that it gives you a lot of interesting information that you don't usually get from textiles.
What kind of stories did these coverlets tell? I mean, I know you just explained that you can kind of tell maybe who purchased it and who produced it and when and where. But is there anything else that we can maybe draw out of these artifacts?
Well, there is a lot of symbology on the coverlets as well. The coverlet makers put the words liberty, independence. There's the eagles as symbols on the coverlets. They were very proud of their country. There are also trees and birds, and there are certain symbols that we don't even recognize, but sometimes Masonic symbols are on there. The Independence Hall from Philadelphia shows up as a symbol on the coverlets.
So these were a way then for maybe the producers and the people commissioning these to express their personalities, their beliefs, things like that.
Yes.
So what was the inspiration behind this exhibit at the History Center?
Well, we did Historic Quilts Unwrapped 2 years ago, and when we did that, we found coverlets as part of those bed coverings sort of mixed together, and we were very taken with the coverlets. We made a visit to the Coverlet Museum that's in Palmyra, New York, where they were on exhibit, and we were just breathtaking when we walked in there. Such a strong graphic, and we said would be a fabulous display. And so we asked if we could then do the coverlets next.
So it just kind of came straight out of the quilting exhibit.
That's right.
So what's the real relationship then between kind of the quilting tradition and the coverlet making tradition?
Well, they were going on, of course, at the same time. People were making quilts, they were making coverlets. The quilts were more often made by women. The coverlets were more often made by men. You might see a little difference in style based on that. The New York coverlets were mostly made by Scottish men, and they have a very formal look to them, much more formal than the quilts do, I would say. And they... Also, the Scottish men that were mostly working in New York were mostly working in blue and white, red and white. Other places in the country, in Pennsylvania, they were using orange and green, and they were much more floriferous, not so formal as the New York coverlets.
Now, are these things that are still made today? I mean, I understand there's kind of still a modern quilting tradition that still exists today. Are people still making coverlets?
No, they're not. It was a very brief period when people were making coverlets. The whole movement of coverlet making died at the beginning of the Civil War. The men that were making coverlets went off to fight. There was a shortage of good cotton. And even after the war, the weavers described it as rotten and horrible, and they were unable to weave a good coverlet. And there's even songs and poems about the bad cotton that they were getting. But the whole movement of making coverlets stopped right then. Also, the Industrial Revolution had gone a little further, and you could buy blankets that were made in factories, and they were much more economical, and there was sort of a whole change in the decorative style.
So then they're kind of stuck in this period, these kind of pictures of time when there was the technology to make them, but before the technology got so good that you could get something maybe more mass produced.
That's right.
So what is your favorite piece in the exhibit?
Well, there's one that I really love. It's red and white, and it's a really bright, vibrant cherry red. And it, when you selected your coverlet, you could pick your color. And there were two colors of red. One was madder, and one was made with the cochineal beetle. And that cochineal beetle red is a very vibrant, very rich red. And there's one coverlet that I just love that's got that bright red.
And if people wanted to go check out this particular red coverlet, how long is the exhibit running at the History Center?
The exhibit is up through April.
And are there any other kind of special events or talks or kind of presentations happening in conjunction with it?
One is coming right up. The director of the Coverlet Museum in Palmyra is coming to speak on Saturday, March 8th, 2 to 4 p.m. You can bring a coverlet if you've got one that you want to share. It will be really fun. I've met with Bonnie Hayes a number of times. She's a lot of fun, and she just knows a ton about coverlets.
So I'm interested in the fact that you mentioned that some people may still have these. I mean, are there a lot of these kind of around in private ownership, or are they mostly kind of in museums at this point, or History Center collections?
Well, people treasured them. They had their family names on them oftentimes. It's woven right into the coverlet. And because it's got all this history right on it, they're important family heirlooms as well as historical artifacts for a community.
That's great. Well, you can come see some of these important family heirlooms and artifacts for a community at the exhibit Historic Coverlets Unwrapped. It's running at the History Center in Tompkins County until April 5th. And I have been speaking with Nancy Ostman, who helped curate the exhibit and who is also a member of the Tompkins County Quilters Guild. Nancy, thank you so much for coming in this evening to speak with us.
You're welcome.